Hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Lashley. I am the program coordinator for Urban Waterways at Anacostia Community Museum in Washington, D.C. Thank you for spending a portion of your Saturday afternoon with us. Today is our third community forum, Climate Justice in Action, and it's part of our ongoing month-long celebration of Women's History Month. So for those of you who've joined us before, welcome back. Always glad to see you. For new participants, thank you very much for joining our network. I want to quickly give you a brief overview of today's event and then move into the discussion. So I'm going to place today's community forum in the content of the museum's ongoing work. Then we're going to introduce our moderator. We're going to move into discussion, which will last about just over an hour or so. Around 2:20, we'll open up for your comments and your questions. You have two options for engaging our panelists today. You can type your questions in the Q&A box, or if you'd like, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. My two colleagues today, Janelle and Mark, will be producing the event, and they'll be posting various links to resources in the chat. We also encourage you to engage each other and the panelists in the chat as well. So moving forward. The Women's Environmental Leadership Initiative, or WELL, moving forward, comes out of the Urban Waterways project, which is now entering its 11th year. And Dr. Gail Lowe, who was the senior historian at ACM for many years, was very interested in unpacking, documenting, and just exploring relationships between urban communities and their waterways, looking firstly at the Anacostia River and communities in Washington, D.C., particularly communities east of the Anacostia River, but also looking at similar cities and communities, similar experiences and histories to see, how are communities engaging or re-engaging with their waterways, what debates, conflicts are having, how are they working through these debates and conflicts, and what are the best practices or models that they're using to really engage all residents to have access to these discussions, but also access to these green and blue spaces. And so this project really is based on the premise that urban communities and their waterways share not only these physical spaces, but also this ongoing evolving history. If you're talking about it from the perspective of this is a relationship, you have to explore it and document it from all angles. So is it the science? Is it the art? Is it the history? Is it power, race, class? It really is all of this. And so if we understand that water is life, as many communities collaborators have told us, water is the center of everything, we move out from the blue spaces to the green spaces to these built environments, these gray spaces, and everywhere in between. And so we're really very intrigued in kind of exploring, documenting how communities understand their connection to the natural world, how they define the natural world and environment, and how they're interested in advocating for all of these community spaces, and how they're trying to provide or gain more access to the spaces in which these decisions around the environment and the future, the shape of cities are being made. And so as we were engaged in this work, documentation, research, exhibitions, programming, we were meeting various communities and their organizations and the residents. And, I became very aware of the women who were leading these multiple spaces. They were defining environment in multiple ways. Many of these women were working or continue to work in spaces that they themselves helped to create. Many of these women have, I would say, pushed back against very narrow definitions of environment. I've questioned the lack of diversity in mainstream environmental spaces. And so the very spaces in which they're kind of pushing forward or expanding, even to this day, are the spaces that they kind of open doors into. We've also met women who are midway through their careers, women who are starting out in the first couple of years, and young women who are just thinking about entering these spaces, who are just literally opening the doors and stepping in from their educational spaces into their careers. And so many of them, I would say, they are the embodiment of this ongoing history. So as you are doing this work, by you, I mean the panelists and also our attendees and those who have engaged us over the years, as you're doing the work, you're also adding to this ongoing history. And so how could we bring you into conversation with each other, thinking about building capacity for environmental leadership from now and also moving into the future? And so this idea was to bring into conversation an intergenerational group of women around issues of mentorship, education, training, and then leadership, what it can look like. And the museum, ACM, sees ourselves as privileged. We are conveners. We provide a platform, we provide a resource, we provide tools, but we're being led by the expertise of these women. And so we're standing in the corner, recording, documenting, but really the expertise and knowledge, the very history is being made by many of you today. And so our goal really is to work in partnership with you. And this kind of, the understanding that many of you are not only working through these issues, but you also have been living through these issues. And so in 2018, the WELL initiative launched with a summit and then a community forum. 2019, in partnership with, and thanks to the support of the Smithsonian's American Women's History Initiative, we expanded from a summit to community workshops to dinner and discussions, to oral histories, a publication of called Women, Environmentalism and Justice, aimed at late middle and early high schoolers. And then moving into 2020, as we moved to a virtual space, we had the added support of PEPCO. We launched a fall series of lectures, which continues to this month's celebration of women's history with community forums, and another series of lectures coming on later in the spring and in the summer. And so the goal of today's conversation really is to kind of place the concepts of climate and climate change in the context of our daily lives. And doing so requires an understanding and addressing of the impacts of climate change through a justice lens. And so given the histories and present realities and just the power structures and society in which we live, any honest conversations that seeks to unpack how we got to this moment in time has to acknowledge the concepts and definitions of justice and how it has or has not been enacted. So this conversation, we will strive to kind of trace the experiences of moving through and living in communities whose day-to-day, I'd say most visibly reflect the impacts of climate injustice. And so what does one see, feel, hear, taste, and smell? How does climate justice or injustice shape your experience in the world? Your sense of self, your sense of identity, and your sense of a right to move through and to have access to multiple spaces in the world. Conversation will also highlight this ongoing action on the part of communities, how people are understanding these issues, how they're defining these issues, how they're engaging in these issues, and also once again highlighting this idea of agency, the emphasis of, as you're kind of looking into or facing these seemingly insurmountable forces, how are communities stepping into inheriting these legacies of civic engagement, of activism and stewardship, and how does their work today kind of just as a reflection of these ongoing global movements toward justice. And so finally, we also want to look at this idea of success. How do you define success? What futures are we envisioning? And how do we build them? What do climate just communities look like? And how do these communities, their shape will change depending on location? And we're fortunate to be led in discussion today by Cynthia Peurifoy. So recently retired officially, when I say retired officially, Cynthia served as the Regional Environmental Justice Coordinator at the EPA Protection Agency Region 4 in Atlanta, Georgia. Throughout her career, she has built lasting relationships with many environmental justice stakeholders in Region 4 and has worked to create an atmosphere of engagement, respect, and collaboration around EJ issues in the region. Her various positions and program areas included coordinating the regional response team, working with the Community Right to Know program, and working in the Office of Civil Rights. Other primary responsibilities included coordinating EPA's efforts in support of the Charleston, North Charleston Community-Based Environmental Protection Project. And Cynthia has also been a key player and continues to be in the ReGenesis Environmental Justice Partnership. Cynthia, very glad to turn the program over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. And again, thank you so much for this wonderful series. It has been awesome. And I look forward to working with these wonderful women today who are leaders in climate justice and the work that they're doing. So we're going to get right into it. You've done a great introduction. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. And we're going to start with Reverend Dr. Nettie Astildo. She is a Venezuelan American. She's an theologian and Presbyterian pastor who coordinates green faith organizing and training for Latinx communities. Nettie earned her Doctor of Ministry in Greening the Church from Drew University and co-founded the Organics Learning Center, a farm-based nonprofit in Northern Illinois, where people connect with food, farming, and caring for the earth. Nettie has taught ecotheology courses at seminars in Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, Bolivia, and the United States, serving as editor of the Presbyterian for Earth Care newsletter, been published in workingpreacher.org, Earth and World, classic sermons on saving the planet, and in a co-author of God's Earth is Secret, essays on eco-justice. In 2019, Nettie was published in Kairos for Creation, Confessing Hope for the Earth, which recommends to the World Council of Churches to declare a decade for the healing of creation. Thank you for all you have done, and we're looking forward to hearing from you today. We're going to also introduce the wonderful Dr. Adrienne Hollis. Adrienne Hollis, PhD, JD, is a senior climate justice and health scientist for the Union of Concerned Scientists. She leads the work of the methods for assessing and documenting the health impacts of climate change on communities of color and other traditional disenfranchised groups, and ensure scientific information from Union of Concerned Scientists is communicated in a culturally competent and helpful manner to vulnerable populations. Dr. Hollis works with environmental justice communities to identify priority health concerns related to climate change and other environmental assaults, and evaluates climates and energy policy approaches for their ability to effectively address climate change and benefit underserved communities. Within the climate and energy program, she examines climate and energy policies aimed at reducing exposure to negative health and environmental impacts, and recommends policy approaches to foster inclusiveness and greater benefits to underserved communities and effectively address climate change. Dr. Hollis has more than 20 years of experience in the environmental arena, particularly focusing on environmental justice, equity, and inclusion, and the adverse health effects of environmental exposure and climate change of vulnerable communities. And I know this young lady from way back when she was in Region 4 at FAMU, and also at the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry. And we're so fortunate to have you and your expertise here today, and look forward to hearing from you. Now we're going to Caroline Alexander Lewis. Now this lady right here, if you've never heard her, you're really in for a treat today. She is an independent consultant who is passionate about effective education. Additionally, as founder and senior advisor of the CLEO Institute, Ms. Lewis promotes climate literacy and support for bold action. In 2002, Ms. Lewis, a science teacher and high school principal, created the Fairchild Challenge. The interdisciplinary environmental education program still annually engages teams of thousands of students in Miami and around the world. As of 2016, founding director of Cushman High School, Lewis provided a unique vision for a vigorous, creative, character-based, and civic engagement-focused high school education. Her service roles include the EPA's National Environmental Education Advisory Council, American Public Garden Association, Miami-Dade Executive Board of Science Curriculum and Instruction, and White House Summits on Climate and Energy and Women and the Environment, the Conservation Fund's Advisory Panel, Congressman Caballero's Climate Advisory Team, and others. In 2013, Ms. Lewis was nationally recognized as a White House Climate Resilience Champion of Change. In 2015, she authored Just Back Off and Let Us Teach, a book for effective teachers and those who champion them. In 2017, she was featured speaker of the Miami March for Science and the People's Climate March. Miami and the Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce recognized her as a global change maker. In 2018, Ms. Lewis was named by Time Magazine as one of 31 individuals making a difference in the South. And in 2019, Ms. Lewis was briefly featured in National Geographic's documentary From Paris to Pittsburgh. Ms. Lewis, oh boy, we in for a treat with you today. I already know it. Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to get right into the questions, and I'm going to ask each of you a question, but we're going to start off with different people. And I love this question, and we're going to start off with Caroline. It's what community were you raised in? Your first memory, understanding of connection to the natural world, your definition of environmental justice.
Well, thank you so very much, Cynthia. If I knew you were going to be reading that bio, I would have kept it a lot shorter. So I apologize. So I was born and raised in Port of Spain, Trinidad. And so I grew up in the developing world, a third world country, a little island nation, the southernmost island in the chain of Caribbean islands. And my first encounter with nature is that I lived off the land. I mean, all I did when I woke up in the morning was literally put on my shorts and t-shirt, wake up my brother, and we hit the road. We were like wild animals. And so mangoes for lunch, pomsite, pomerac, chenet, whatever fruit we could reach for was what kept us going all day long. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was living off the land and loving it. I wouldn't come home till I knew my mother would be freaking out like dinner time. And so my connection with nature is that the world was my stage for exploring and creating. And my definition for environmental justice is literally putting people before infrastructure or alongside it. I get so tired of environmental resilience being talked about, how to make the buildings and the landscapes more resilient. And I want the people to be more resilient. And they cannot be more resilient if they're being dumped on. So for me, environmental justice is the deliberate taking advantage of people without power these justice communities so that they are indeed informed and able to advocate in their own interests.
Thank you. Reverend Nettie, could you answer that question as well, please?
Yes, thank you very much. And it is a blessing to be with all of you, wonderful women this day. I like to say when I think about the community that I was raised, first to acknowledge that my family, like most families in Latin America, are founded on the stories and culture of several grandmothers. In my paternal case, a European grandmother, an immigrant who liked to bathe in milk to preserve her white skin, and another grandmother, an indigenous woman from the Amazonian region who preferred to bathe in the river, so not to forget her connection with the earth. So I never knew the name of the first grandmother, but the name of the second one, indigenous grandmother, was Dios Gracia. Literal translation would be God's grace. I was born in Venezuela in 1968 of a Venezuelan father and a Colombian mother. Two young, passionate people whom in their early 20s after I was born decided to move to Argentina during a time of political turmoil there, a dictatorship, to pursue their theological studies. We lived in a seminary with other families and students from other countries from Latin America. And so my friends, my mentors, my world was the people that I saw and I learned and grew up with were from a lot of different backgrounds, cultural diversity. But my life was always led by spiritual and faith values. And the fact that this was a time also of political unrest and repression and even disappearance of activists that spoke too loud about environmental or social justice, I should say, that also meant that I witnessed at a very young age, not only social injustice, but also a church trying to figure out its calling in the midst of social injustice. I witnessed the church speaking, preaching, singing, praying from the struggles of the people of the time. The life inside of the seminary was beautiful because of its cultural diversity and the solidarity that we experienced. And we also ate all together in the dining hall, the games, the Argentinian barbecues. That was all beautiful, but these were also very tense times, and a time that my parents could not escape. So my first memory of the connection with the natural world for me was a pure heaven, in the sense that going out into the natural world, let's say going to the ocean, going to the countryside, was the place where we experienced safety, we experienced beauty, we experienced peace. And those are the moments that I remember as my upbringing. What nature meant to me at the time was that a place of escaping all the social unrest and difficulties and violence. Is a place to be surrounded by peace. And definitely it was a place where my parents also would put down their guards. They would leave their struggles behind and just enjoy life, and enjoyed each other as a couple, and we enjoyed ourselves as a family. So that was my first experience in nature. I think it was idyllic, it was beautiful, wonderful. And it is no surprise that today also I seek those places to restore myself, to find peace, to reconnect with myself and what's important to me. And the definition then of environmental justice, well, environment definitely is the place where I live, where I was born, the place I grew up, I grow out of, the place we breathe, we grow, we eat, we worship, and we fall in love, we multiply. It is Madre Tierra, Mother Earth. And as a person of faith, it's also the place where I encounter God. It's the place where I know the mysteries and the wisdom of God. And it is not just nature, but it's also God's creation. And when I think about justice, I always remember something I learned in seminary. One of my professors was J. McDaniel, and he spoke of justice as faithfulness to relationships. It's a justice as something that grows out of an understanding of our interrelationships. And so I would say environmental justice is then living in a way that we recognize our interconnections. It is living in a way that the earth can flourish, can regenerate. It is a place, it's a way that we find peace and love, and it's a way that we also protect the lives of future generations.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Hollis.
First of all, thanks to everybody for those wonderful answers. I wish I could just say ditto and let me get away with that. So first, to start with where I was raised, what kind of community. So I was definitely raised in a community of family. My mom is one of 10, and the first 5 had children as old as the second 5. So we have, whenever I talk to people, I say my cousin, and we're all, so many first cousins, it's crazy. And my mom made it a point that we all knew each other, right? That we spent time together. And so that is the surrounding that I grew up in, where we looked out for each other. And I also, with my 4 brothers, we're very close. And my mom was very close to us because she raised us by herself. And, we just depended on each other. Unfortunately, to my brother's detriment, they used to, they would fight for each other, which meant I had to jump in and fight for them. So, we were like a little gang, I guess. That's my community. And we grew up, of course, in the shadow of the paper mill. And we were poor, but we didn't know it. Everybody around us was the same. So we had what we needed and that kind of thing. So my first, I guess, exposure to a realization about nature. My grandfather and my grandparents were our leaders, right? The matriarch and the patriarch. So my grandfather had in his house, he had, at his house, he had azaleas. And in Mobile, if you know Mobile, they had this thing called the Azalea Trail. They don't have that anymore, where they literally had a pink strip of paint that went down the street and took you to different neighborhoods. And where he lived was part of the Azalea Trail, which we can't figure out why, because it was definitely in the Black part of town. But and so that was my first exposure to, whenever I went over there, you know, we would do things in the yard, and he had fig trees and different kinds of fruit trees that people don't have now. And we go blackberry hunting and whatever. But when I went over there and put my feet in the grass, that for me was, oh gosh, it was a place, it helped me to center myself. Where I lived, wherever we lived, it was rental property. We didn't have grass, right? So I remember we used to rake the dirt to make it neat. My mother didn't play, and and then sweep the outside. She said, well, come and sweep the outside out of the house. And so when I would get an opportunity to play in grass, that was important to me. And secondly, and this will be quick, we used to go fishing, and people talk about gumbo now like it's a treat, but for us it was a necessity, because you could make a big pot of gumbo to feed the 5 of us, my 3 cousins, who at one point we all lived with my grandparents. And so we'd go crabbing and in a place where you can't go now, and we'd use chicken back and all these sorts of things, but it was sustaining. Nature was sustaining. And that's what I remember, is when we needed to go and get food for the week or food for the next couple of weeks. And I think the next question was about environmental justice, and which is an interesting question. So first, environment to me is so many different things. When I first started working here, it was, the environment, everything around you, where you live, pray, work, go to school, the definition. And then I realized that it's both physical and mental, right? It's and it's internal and external. So for example, if I'm at a job and there are minorities there, the environment is the conditions under which they are allowed to operate. And I said allowed. And so that's already a toxic environment, right? And then toxic environments, as in the terms of my job, and what I do, is the environment that people, including my family, have been exposed to. Another toxic environment, but this one more man-made, caused by hazardous substances and things of that nature. And so justice for me, because I like to break it down, justice for me is equity in action. And by that, if I could just give you a quick visual, say that there's an apple tree that leans to the left, and the kid on the left can get the apples, but the kid on the right can't. So you give them ladders, but the kid on the right still can't. So you give the kid on the right a taller ladder. So now you have equity. Well, instead, why not straighten the tree? Then everybody has equal access. And to me, in environmental justice, it's not equal pollution. We hear this all the time, right? It's equal protection. So why not start, everybody has the same consideration when it comes to protections, the same responses when it comes to protecting them. And so that is justice for me. That is environmental justice for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hollis. We could get a lot deeper into those answers. We're going to move on to the next question, and it's what brought you to environmental work? And we're going to start with Reverend Nettie.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Well, in a way, I think that the foundation that my engagement with the environmental work was certainly led by my upbringing in Argentina, living in the seminary life and the social political environment at the time. But it all came together for me 30 years ago at a time when we were back now in Venezuela. And now I was a sociology student, no surprise there. someone trying to figure out the social phenomenons of my time, in my new context, and still a person of faith, also trying to figure out my calling. I was 3 years in my sociology studies, and I think I had finally, understood, why poverty, why injustice, why repression. I think I understood all of that, but I didn't know exactly where to plug myself to transform my world. I knew I wanted to make the world a better place, but I didn't know where to start. And I think I need to say that I had not yet found my vocation. But something else was happening. I know that I was praying for discernment at the time. I started having dreams, repetitive dreams, where I was swimming with dolphins underwater. And these dreams were full of peace and love of a kind that I had never experienced awake. And these were mystical dreams, but I had no idea what they meant. Only that they began to open my eyes to notice a problem happening in Venezuela caused by the tuna industry and the shark fishing industry. And the newspapers were publishing articles, so I began to cut those articles and put them around my bedroom, until one day my sister calls me and says that exactly at that time, a public forum was beginning talking about the slaughter of dolphins in Venezuela. And so I immediately left to go to that place, and what I heard that day just changed my life forever. That day I found my vocation. After listening to the lecture, I eagerly approached the presenters and I told them, I'm a sociology student. I don't know a lot about this, but I want to help. I want to be volunteer. Is there anything I can do? And when I said that with an air of relief, they smiled and they said, we've been looking for a sociologist willing to work with us for over a year. And they said, yes, we do have a job for you. Come tomorrow to our office. And that started a journey that hasn't ended. I found myself traveling to the east coast of my country, living among fishing communities, learning how dolphins and traditional fishermen were all entangled in a vicious system created to favor fishing industries and to satisfy the appetite of consumers of tuna and shark fins here in the US and in Asian countries. What happened at the time is that my country had bought the tuna fishing boats from the US when the environmental laws were passed here in the US and had banned these fishing fleets for causing the deaths of thousands of dolphins. But Venezuela did not have the same environmental laws to protect marine mammals or traditional fishing communities. So they were all being affected by this and other trawler ships and things like that would take fish of all sizes from near the shore, and so it was causing a whole vicious cycle of struggle and slaughter. And at the time, I was a youth leader in my church at the national level. I found myself with the desire of sharing this experience with my church. And of course, sociology gave me enough narrative and words to talk about environmental issues from a sociological perspective, but I had no language, no narrative, no knowledge, even of what the Bible said about creation care, caring for the natural world, or justice for fishing communities. And so I found myself without being able to really engage my community. And there was no other pastor or leader at the time talking about environmental justice. And so to make a long story short, within a year and a half, when I say it, God found God's way to bring me to the United States to what I thought it was going to be a temporary trip. And I learned while here that the seminaries in the United States were teaching what was now considered a new prophetic ministry of the church called environmental ministry. And so I decided, okay, this is what I need. This is a tool that's missing in my box. And I enrolled myself in seminary. Again, because I wanted to work with the church, with the people of God as a movement on issues of environmental justice. And that's where my work began and hasn't stopped since.
What an amazing story. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Miss Caroline, you're next. You ready? You're on mute.
Sometimes it's a good thing when I'm on mute, but so I have two like pivotal points that got me into this line of work. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology from McMaster University, and then I went on to get a Bachelor in Education in Toronto, University of Toronto. And I picked science, high school physics, chemistry, biology, and they said you have to pick another major as well. And I picked environmental science. So I was always a student of the environment. Growing up in Trinidad, I had that connection with nature. But in 2002, when I left being in a school, I was in a botanic garden trying to create programs to engage disengaged teenagers. And I read an article in Time magazine by Jane Goodall, and the opening sentence was, "The greatest danger to our future is apathy." And that was like a call to action for me. That was like, I got you, Jane, I got this. I will wake up the world and there will be no more apathy. And in 2002, I created the Fairchild Challenge, which has scaled remarkably in Miami-Dade. Tens of thousands of kids annually engage in interdisciplinary environmental challenges. Remarkable. And then in 2010, when I left the garden, I was forming my own nonprofit, and the climate scientists locally said to me, "Caroline, we need help. We need to get the public to understand this. They're not engaged." And so the urgency of the data and the need to build agency in the public really got my interest. And that's when I created the CLEO Institute to build climate leadership top down and bottom up simultaneously. So my wake-up calls have been the need that has been created by what's going on, the fact that we see climate change and the climate crisis as a threat multiplier to all the social injustice that I worry about. And so I hope I have helped to wake up a lot of the social justice organizations to embrace climate justice as part of the solution to what we're trying to accomplish altogether. So those are my two pivotal points.
Thank you. Dr. Hollis.
Yes, so yet another good question, hard question. So my two things, I also have a quick story. When I was younger, which of course was most recently, in my recent future, recent past, I remember that, and I told this story so many times, I hope people who ever heard this before, I apologize, that there were only certain places that you could swim. You could go to a beach in Alabama, in Mobile, and in Alabama, and we couldn't go to Pensacola Beach. So we went to this beach called Fairhill Beach, and then another little beach, Paradise Beach, that some Black people had. It was not really a beach, it was just a little piece of land that they owned. And I remember getting in the water. My mother had just bought me a two-piece, because it wasn't a bikini, because I was like preteen, and it was white. And I wore it. And when I came out of the water, it was black. I remember that a piece of wood rubbed up against me, and I had this huge oil stain going across my chest, and it was never white again. And that stood out. And then I remember just growing up, my brother and my cousin and people I knew, all had asthma. And my mom didn't have any money, and she was, a lot of people didn't, and they would hold kids over the bathtub and run the hot water to open up their lungs, right? So that they could breathe, instead of trying to, paying money for money they didn't have for asthma medicine. So those were the two things that stuck out. And I knew that I wanted to do something around environment. Justice, I grew up, I saw the Klan for the first time when I was young. And so prejudice and racism was something that kids grew up with in the South. in Mobile. So I wasn't thinking, I guess, as much about putting the two together. This is before I knew about just EJ, although we were definitely an environmental justice community. And then I remember when I was doing my postdoc and this white guy called to me because I was a Black person carrying a garbage bag, and he chided me for not emptying his garbage. And I remember just thinking that I had had enough, right? Just because you're Black or a person of color, that means you do this work and not, I couldn't be a postdoc there. And I thought about that, and and my cousin worked on the Manhattan Project and actually died from cancer. I'd never met him. He died the year I finished high school. And my first real turning point was a study I did to look at tobacco advertising. And what I found, it was in Boston, that for the Black community, the Black youth, the advertising was eye level. And it was pretty much, if you want to be cool, you'll start smoking. And in the white communities, it was at the top of buildings. So it wasn't eye level. And I was like, that was just the first thing. And I was working at the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry then shortly after that. And I just remember thinking, we're not really doing anything to help to work with people. We're just putting out reports. And my sense of dissatisfaction is what really led me to this work. The sense of, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not working with people. I'm not answering questions. I'm not looking for answers or putting things in front of people who could make a difference, or even trying to make a difference in that. So yeah, so that's where, my interest came from, so.
Okay, and I want you to follow up and start this next question off as well, okay? And it is, why is it important to place climate change in the context of daily life?
Wow. Why you put because for me, this is how I think of it, and I'm going to say, you can't talk about climate change without talking about environmental justice and public health. You cannot. And I always say that, and people are like, what? But you can't, because we are the ones who are affected first, right? And you have to put it in context of daily life, because it is affecting people's daily lives. It's what is it, and how does it affect me, and what can I do about it? Those are the questions that people want to know, right? And so the only way you're going to affect change is to help people recognize and realize that this is you too. It might not be you yet, but it will be you, right? And I know we're going to hear a little bit about climate gentrification. And when I mentioned, and I think I heard, it may have been my fangirl crush, Miss Lewis, but it's when you people already know that it affects them, right? That's the whole, one of the premises behind climate gentrification. People want to move to somewhere else and move out other people, but it's all about being selfish. But when you start talking to people about how a thing affects their daily life, then you start seeing results, because now it's affecting the individual. So you've got to put it front and center, not only because that's how you're going to get people who work in this area to do something, but also because you have to recognize that there are people who are living this thing every day, and they need to be, there needs to be change. Sorry.
Thank you. Miss Caroline, what's your answer to this question?
Well, I think Adrienne hit the nail on the head. The whole idea of daily life it's really connecting the dots, or helping people connect the dots, because I'm in Miami and they talk about sea level rise all day long, when it's important. But so is food and water and heat and health vulnerability. So is gentrification, displacement of populations. And so I think if we don't facilitate the dot connecting for these frontline communities, they're not fully informed. So climate gentrification, as she mentioned, is a big deal down here. When we first went into the low income, underserved communities of Little Haiti and Liberty City, and we show them the maps of Miami-Dade County. And then we show them what 1-2 feet of sea level rise would do with respect to inundation, and then 4 feet, and then 6 feet. And you could see these people in the audience going, oh, we're still dry. We're on the high ground. That's why they want our property. So when I say connecting the dots, a food desert, they don't know that they're living in a food desert. So we explain what a food desert is and why they have to travel further to get fresher food. We get a chance to really have these frontline communities learn to advocate for themselves. And so we have a couple programs at the CLEO Institute that kind of do just that. And I gotta tell you, people love having their eyes open, and they're really pissed off, excuse my language, that they didn't know this before. They were like going, why don't we know this? We need more education. So the things that they want, once they find out it's part of their daily lives, they want a seat at the table. They don't want the city and the county and the businesses coming in and telling them how they're going to be resilient. They want to be there talking about what they're experiencing and what needs to be solved. So we work hard to give a seat at the table to these communities. We also hear their cry. They want more education. They want us to do something in their communities every month for them, so they can see the science, the impacts, and the solutions, and be a part of their own solution-orientedness. And the third thing they all want is reassurance that they're not going to remain underserved. Because when you think about that term, I'm looking on with the University of Miami now, the CLEO Institute is working on a high-low program, hyper-localism, where we're trying to get residents in small pods to use their eyes and to use photography and design thinking to sort of understand what they're feeling and seeing and the quality of life issues that are coming up. And the fact that the climate crisis exacerbates all of that makes it imperative for us doing the work to continue to lift up the voices of these frontline communities by making sure they have a seat at the table and they have enough of a breakdown of the science and the impacts so they're advocating their own interests and not against their own interests, which unfortunately has happened.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Nettie?
Thank you. Yes, as I'm listening to my sisters here, I'm thinking, yes, definitely there is a kind of trifold process. I say that one definitely is helping people recognize and see how our life is being affected by climate change. Also how it is affecting other people, other people's lives. And then the other piece, as a person of faith, and then the moral and ethical reasons, I think, of why it is important to place climate change in the context of our daily life is the fact that we are also affecting other people's lives. We are part of the problem in a way. As you know, as now I'm an immigrant to the United States, I'm a citizen in the US. I've learned that even though we're 5% of the world's population, we are using 25% of the world's resources to energize our lifestyle. We are also responsible for around 25% of the carbon emissions that are already in the atmosphere, reaping havoc and causing the climate change that we're experiencing today. So therefore, we cannot escape, at least as a person of faith, a person of moral values, ethical values, the need to realize, okay, in which way my own lifestyle is affecting climate at this moment. And we know now it relates to the way that we eat, or the way we deal with our waste, with our food waste, the way that we move, the way we use energy. And so the fact that we are part of the problem, but also we can be part of the solution, it is a must that we need to bring this to our daily conversation and trying to figure out how to live, how to stop and revert climate change so other communities don't suffer as much. what the most vulnerable that are already suffering and future generations will suffer if we don't stop this now. No. So definitely it requires a conversation about our lifestyle today, especially in the North, in the US, and reconsideration what it is a good life, because this just cannot continue without us destroying the earth and life the way we love it.
Okay, and I want you to start off this next question. What does climate have to do with justice? And take us through some specific examples, if you don't mind.
Okay, so yes, so we start exactly dealing with the justice piece now. Well, if it's justice, again, looking at justice as faithfulness to relationships, we can say that climate change is the result of our unfaithful ways of relating to each other and relating to the natural world by ignorance or purposely. And climate change has to do with justice too, because we see today that those who are suffering the most from climate change are the ones who are least responsible for those emissions of greenhouse gas emissions that are in the atmosphere today. So we see how our actions are impacting others. And because if we're people who say we love justice, we just cannot escape the conversation. And a specific example, I was thinking a specific example, when did I even experience climate injustice the first time? I think I can say that it's also back to when I was a sociology student in Venezuela. I lived in Caracas, a very cosmopolitan city. I knew well air pollution, what it looked like, because of all the fossil fuel burning of cars and factories. I remember the headaches and the sore throats that sometimes I would have, especially in particular days when there was not enough wind blowing the smoke out of the city in the valley where Caracas lays, and on hotter days too, where the smoke would just accumulate all around us. At that time, Venezuela was the main exporter of crude oil to the United States, and gasoline was cheaper even today than water. But we use lead gasoline, which I thought it was all that existed, until one day I also read in the newspaper a very short article that said that one of the conditions that the International Monetary Fund was placing over the Venezuelan government to give us millions of dollars in aid included that Venezuela needed to continue using lead gasoline for another 4 years. I learned then that there was not the only type of gasoline that existed. We were producing lead-free gasoline for US markets, for American people, but the Venezuelan folk, we did not have the right to use lead-free gasoline for another 4 years, regardless of all the well-known health impacts that it had on people, especially women and children and youth, including myself. So that would be one specific example from my own life experience of how those climate injustice it looks like.
Dr. Hollis, sorry. You want to take that and kind of answer all three questions at the same time, if you don't mind?
It's 3 questions?
Yeah, just give us some examples. And when you think about climate and justice, and really, how does it impact the community? And how does it translate into the quality of life?
That's all?
Yeah. You can do it.
Okay, well, yeah, so I already described justice, right? About equity in action. And so the same communities that, and I say this at work, the same communities that I was describing, if you can picture that, these are the ones that, because of redlining and systemic racism, are put in situations that put them more at risk. They're not vulnerable communities, they're strong communities. They put in situations that make them vulnerable, their situation vulnerable, right? So that's the underlying issue, that systemic racism leads to these areas that are going to be prone to environmental exposures. And then when you have climate change, more severe weather, chronic inundation, flooding, and stuff like that, it's going to be the same communities, right? And so to me, climate justice is a component of environmental justice, as it, I like to do examples. So if environmental justice is a huge umbrella, and then climate justice, immigration justice, all of those things are part of what supports that, what stems from that. And so one example that I'm going to quickly give is from Virginia. We met some, Vernice Miller-Travers knows this, we met some beautiful people, the Lowrys, from the Buckingham County, Virginia. And these people in the Friends of Buckingham County were fighting up two pipelines, the Atlantic Coast and the Mountain Valley. And we participated in a human rights tribunal, United Nations tribunal. And the communities told us that they were told, because your area is so clean and pristine, you can stand a little bit of pollution. And this is a historically, it's a freedmen's community. So former slave owners and former slaves in this area banded together. And then they were told, we're gonna, we took the path of least resistance, which is what they do on purpose, right? And that is injustice. And so they wanted to put these 3 compressor stations in the community. So now you have not only running these things running 24 hours and releasing all kinds of contaminants into the environment, but you also have the explosive probability, actually. And so what they were told was, if you can get out, you'll be fine. Well, that's the issue, isn't it? Getting out, because you're not going to get a warning sign that says, oh, it's about to explode, right? So that is deliberate, and it's the epitome of injustice to me. And so that is my example of climate justice. And one of the reasons why we do continue to do the work, that I and others do, is because of situations like this. This isn't abnormal. This is the norm, right? That people are treated that way. Did I answer every question?
Yes, you did, ma'am.
Okay.
You sure did. And we're going to move on because I think our time is going fast here. So let's go to the next question. What are the various frameworks, lenses useful for understanding these impacts and addressing them? And why don't we start with you, Caroline?
Well, I think somebody on this great panel said it earlier. I'm tired of studying situations and writing reports and recommendations. It's time for action. And so I didn't get to answer the last question, but I'll tell you, here in Miami, I want you all to know this. Miami's like this, flat as a pancake. You can see my hands, right? Down the middle of the county, kind of diagonally, is this ridge, this coral ridge. It's elevated. And when Miami was being developed and all the rich people were moving down here, they wanted to live on the coast so they could enjoy the beaches. So what did they do? They put all the railroad tracks on the ridge, and they sent all the Black and brown people to live there. And so from redlining and a lot of terrible situations that were abused, these communities of color, Little Haiti, Liberty City, Alapata, means nothing to you, but that's where the Black and brown people developed their families and their culture. Well, that ridge is the highest ground in Miami-Dade County, from 10 to 18 feet in some parts. That's humongously high down here. And so now with climate gentrification, when the developers are seeing that the insurance costs are less if they build on high ground, the rate of gentrification is accelerating at such a pace that it's aggressive. So what do we do about it? We call it out. We say, this is climate gentrification. You can gentrify, but gentrify with the people, don't displace them. And what we have is our frontline communities telling us that the developers are knocking on their doors, letting them know before they even know that there are liens on their properties or they're behind in their taxes. Now, Add in the fact that if you read the Alice reports for your region, and I urge everybody who cares about justice at any level to find those Alice reports and read it, because we know about federal poverty level. We don't know about Alice. Alice is the working poor. The acronym Alice stands for asset limited, income constrained, but employed. And the United Way puts out those numbers. So last time I checked, I put the link up there for you, and I know Mark has shared it. Miami-Dade County has about 3 million people, and about 57% of us are either poor or working poor. What? So when you tell people prepare for a hurricane, and they are living paycheck to paycheck, and they can't do that, and after the hurricane just swipes us, doesn't hit us, they can't go to work for 2 weeks. So they're further behind on their income. So the inequities and the justice aspects of climate are, it's a tempest in a teacup is what I call it down here in Florida. Air conditioning. I was in a town hall in Little Haiti a couple of years ago, talking about a warming world and heat trapping gases and how the data is so dire. And this woman said, "Miss, I know what you mean. When I used to open the window at night to let in some cool air, we used to get some cool air. Now at night, there's no cool air." I said, "Yeah, I know. What happened? You don't have air conditioning?" And she goes, "No." I said, "And why are your windows closed?" And she goes, "Well, it's not safe." So we're picturing these closed up houses, little homes with 10, 12 people in them and no working air conditioning. So when you think about HUD at the federal level and Miami-Dade County Housing Unit and the cities, we're trying to tell them you cannot build affordable housing without air conditioning anymore. It's not federally mandated. You cannot build those homes in the north without heat, but you can build them in the south without air conditioning. And that's the lens we're trying to give everybody. The climate lens will get people moving in the right direction to solve the inequities of what we do. And there's so much opportunity to do the right thing. So we were talking about getting one working wall unit in every home in Miami-Dade County, and to have that unit be solar powered so that it's not an additional bill for them to have one room cooled in the house. So between the gentrification and the fact that people aren't always aware of what's happening, the victimization, people being coerced to sell early, being told your property is assessed at 100,000, I'll give you 150 and I'll help you move down to Homestead, and they take it. And then they find out 2 months later, the property was really worth 300,000. And now they're living an hour and a half away from where they go to work. So the whole quality of life issue is exacerbated. And we're wondering why they can't take better care of their children and be better parents when life itself has gotten so complicated and full of stress. So my solution is to give every sector, the finance sector, the political spectrum, the climate lens, so they can act in the interest of the people. Because if you're truly a public servant, you must serve the public.
Thank you, Caroline. That was excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Reverend Nettie, you want to take that question on as well?
Yes, yeah, in regards to what are the various lenses, frameworks that we can understand these impacts, to address them, well, definitely, again, I position myself as a person of faith. Again, justice is one of those lenses. And also I want to say, recently I learned that in the 80s, when the United Church of Christ came up with the term environmental racism, the idea is that environmental justice and environmental racism as terms should not be separate from each other, but they should always be looked at together. So I want to say that even environmental racism is one of those lessons in which we can see a lot of the things as they are happening and as a way to try to solve them and try and at a systemic level. Someone was asking me about the situation in Venezuela. How come that the IMF require our government to keep us using leaded gasoline for another 4 years? And so again, it's a system of advantage of white supremacy culture. And so those are interesting different ways in which we look at these lenses. Maybe it's more an analysis, but definitely are ways in which we can we need to engage in order to affect the change at a systemic level. And as a person of faith, I guess I want to say again, justice and faith is another lenses in which I use for my work every day. The golden rule, loving thy neighbor as you love yourself, recognizing how this climate change affects us and affects our neighbors. COVID has shown us that our neighbor is even the one on the other side of the world. It's just a matter of time when I will be affected as well. If they're not well, I will not be well either. And so again, justice, recognizing our interrelationships, how we affect each other, but also the golden rule. And for God so loved the world, for God so loved the cosmos, for God so loved the universe. There's definitely for us Christians a calling to take care of the earth and take care of one another, and as a mandate and as a teaching that we cannot forget. I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. I might be getting a little mixed up here. What are some of the action steps communities can take or are taking? How do we contribute to the development of climate literate communities? And please feel free to share any other definitions here, working already been done, projects, community models, etc. So why don't we start with Dr. Adrienne on this one?
Okay, I'll be quick. Oh, sorry, I'll be quick. So some of the things that communities are doing, I want to lift up. Well, we all know. Well, we all don't, but I'm not going to talk in detail about the ReGenesis project. But we know that that's a perfect example of communities taking care of themselves, and we see a lot of that now. And that's because, as Bernice put it, the cavalry ain't coming, right? We have to take care of ourselves and each other. And the example that I do want to give is a community that I've gotten UCS to partner with, and that's Reverend Leo Woodbury in Florence, South Carolina. They just started working on a hydro farm. What that is they use solar panels to pull moisture, particular type of panels, hydro panels, to pull moisture from the air. And that's how they, the whole plan is to ensure that there's water available so that we don't have Flints and we don't have Texas and we don't have other places where there's a water shortage, both in this country and other countries. And the company that they're using, whose name escapes me, actually is already working in 28 other countries and I think 3 different states here. And what this is for me is an example of communities having to step up, which is great, but unfair because nobody is addressing their needs in a satisfactory manner, right? I'm happy to see what this administration has put forward. I'd like to see how that's going to work out, but I definitely see that what we can do is partner with our communities as equal stakeholders, have them at the table, if not leading the table, and recognize that they have historical knowledge and community science that is vital to anything that is going to be done to protect them. Standards setting, guidances, anything, policy development. We need to go to people who live this because they have the most experience and they can teach us a thing or two.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Nettie, you want to take that one as well, please?
Yes, well, I think definitely, and I think Caroline also mentioned this before in terms of supporting people, helping to connect the dots for people, how they are being affected by climate change, how others are, and how they can also make it changes in their own lifestyle, food, energy, transportation, and what are some of the systemic issues that need to be changed in our society so people have a way of living in a way that is sustainable, but also just, not just sustainable. and coming together as communities, you know, congregations coming together, organizing circles, study groups, supporting, organizing, connecting with environmental organizations at the local level, building power, people power, so we can affect change and we can support each other, building resilient, caring communities. One good thing among the Latino communities that at least most Latinas do not deny climate change. We know it is happening. We see it happening. We don't necessarily understand how to change it, but we know it is true. And we see our sisters and brothers back home, if we migrated to the United States, how they are suffering from climate change. So we have that in our advantage, but we also need support and resources and tools to figure out, okay, what can I do about this? And again, we cannot do this as individuals alone. We need a community to support us in that journey. So yeah, that's how we would answer that.
Okay, Miss Caroline, and as you answer that one, can you start on the next one as well? Let's talk about how does it become a natural part of civic engagement?
Amen.
You told us a lot about that already, I know.
Well, I think the most important thing I will tell your listeners is if you're not deliberate, if you are not intentional about really working with the community and building the capacity of these frontline communities, it's not going to happen. We did a gap analysis at the CLEO Institute in about 2013, 2014, as to who was not coming to our programming and outreach and everything, and it was the frontline communities. So I wrote up a funding proposal for a pilot in these underrepresented, underserved communities. And I went to the funder and I was asking for $50,000 just to do the pilot. And they said, no, that's not what we fund. And I just snapped because I said, well, your website is a lie. Because when I read your website, what I'm saying to you is exactly what you say you want to do. And I had a little bit of a temper tantrum in the office. I knew the guy well. He had funded me before. And long story short, we got the money. We did the pilot. And because of that, we woke up a lot of other social justice people who understood the need to build the capacity of these frontline communities to advocate for themselves, to build their capacity. So concretely, what we have done at the CLEO Institute is when we go work with communities, we find leaders or potential leaders within the community so that we are the sage on the stage coming in to tell them what's what, you know? And we have unleashed several sleeping giants that way. And what we have noticed is that they want more, they want power. So we make them part of our CLEO Speakers Network, where we train them and coach them, and we give them a tutor on the side to go through the climate slides, to be able to break down the science, impacts, and solutions, and turn them loose. And the ripple effect of that and the pride they have in being communicators within their own communities is nothing we can ever measure. And we have a school program called CLIP, where we're building climate leadership information programs within schools and speakers of high school students within schools. And part of their assignment is to go home to their parents and to engage in this teaching in an intergenerational way. So those are just two concrete ways that I think we can actively and deliberately build the capacity and the literacy of our frontline communities.
Thank you. So we're gonna, Reverend Nettie, do you want to take on how do you become a natural part of civic engagement? And then we're gonna go on to the youth question, okay?
Sure, and I want to say I love the work of the CLEO Institute. I'm one of those students because I did not learn about climate change in seminary, so this is something I needed to learn afterwards. And I'm blessed to have the CLEO here in Florida. So how does it become part of our natural civic engagement? You know, in spite of all the overwhelming feelings about climate change and all of that, one of the things that I like to think about is the fact that nature itself is providing us a lot of the answers on what to do about this, what to do next. from solar energy, forests, soils, oceans. And I think, part of our civic engagement definitely, it has to be protecting these wonderful sources and taking advantage of these wonderful sources that we have in the natural world to heal our world today, to have a stable planet, climate. So I would say that in our search to have renewable sources of energy, that we need to make sure that all communities, regardless of their race and their income, everybody needs to have access to these resources. And we need to build these renewable, sustainable technologies in a way that is just. Wind energy, our turbines, we need to make them here in the US, because even the transportation from Europe is causing pollution. Even solar energy, the lithium that we are importing from countries and from the Andes in the South America, we need to figure out a way to power our batteries in a way that doesn't create injustice, environmental injustice in other countries. So we have some work to do there. But we have answers also through energy that the sun can give us. In our search to protect forests, we also recognize in my work with Green Faith and protecting rainforest, we also need to protect the rights of indigenous peoples, to recognize that they are the best protectors of our rainforest. So that work has to be done alongside it, providing justice to indigenous peoples' rights. And at the same time, as a person of faith in the Christian world and the history of colonization and genocide, there's also the need of a healing process within Christian communities, and recognizing, as I've heard an evangelical pastor from Colombia say, that this now is no longer a matter of converting souls, but it's a matter of saving the planet, saving our future generations. And so we need to approach relationships with other faith religions and spiritualities in a way that we realize that we're all in this together. We need to figure out a way out together. And in order to protect the soils, well, we need to buy local as much as we can, and organic and natural. We need to learn how to grow our own food, or become members of a community garden, or start a community garden in our communities. Cutting down our meat consumption, especially the one that comes from industrial agriculture. That means also protecting local farmers, our local resources, sources of food, and so on. There are many ways in which we can make this part of our civic and our daily engagement, and bringing climate justice and building this world that we need. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And how do we engage youth? You want to speak on that right quick as well? What is the role of youth? What are some specific ways they can be engaged?
Yes. And I think this relates also with the Latino youth. I think I read the comment of a pastor that's working with Latino communities. Well, I am a mother of 3 boys, wonderful young men. I think one way, and if I look at my own history, providing our young people opportunities for one to experience the natural world, to connect with nature, with the natural world. Not every community has access to that, but we need to make sure that that's part of the upbringing of most people, even if that means having chickens, and even if that means trying to grow your food in a little piece of land from your home. I heard one of our sisters speaking one of the calls a couple of weeks ago, the fact that the natural world is not just another thing, but it's another creature, it's another person that we are relating with and that we depend on. I think our children already are born with this sense of wonder. We need to nurture that sense of wonder. We need to protect that sense of wonder. And if we're thinking about youth now, a little more grown up, I think as Latinos, like I said, most of our people do not deny climate change is real. I think one way is definitely connecting the dots, as I already said. Supporting and connecting, helping them connect with their own passion. What are they passionate about? What they care about? With their own stories in the natural world. In our work with Green Faith, we realized that 80% of people have spiritual experiences in nature, but our own religious traditions don't necessarily provide us a tool to understand them. And I can say that's true for myself. And so we need to nurture those experiences. We need to welcome them. We need to help people of all ages connect with those experiences and try to find what calling is there for them. So I mean, as a pastor, I can say many things, but definitely connecting faith with ecology, learning their own personal stories with the natural world, how others are also experiencing and suffering because of climate change, how it's affecting our communities. And again, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen there, a lot of reconnecting with our ancestors, our previous, with our grandparents. Yeah, yeah, that's what I would say at this moment.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hollis, I've seen you firsthand mentor folks, so I know you have a lot of great answers on this. How do we deal with the young folk? How do we engage them?
Oh, it's so, that's such I'm going to go quickly. The one thing we need to do, I think it's great what what the young people are doing, first of all. Their organizations, and there are a number of them that I used to know at UCS who now belong to their own organizations, and I say their own. And that's what I don't like, is that we're not working together. And what I think, in order to engage the youth, I used to say, volunteer at an EJ organization, an existing organization, so that they can get to know you. I would always take my students with me to communities. Dr. McLean can attest to that. But now I want to say, bring your energy and your passion and your concern for this work in partnership with these organizations. Like, realize the need for partnership, and that while you have this energy and willingness and new ideas, that there's also historical knowledge and things that didn't work and ways of addressing things from the people who've been doing this work. And so that's what I would do, is encourage them to partner. And partner means engage with either a youth group or with an existing community group. But do a partnership, recognize the need for everybody to work together to address the issue.
Okay, thank you. Miss Caroline, this is your issue, so I know you have a lot to say. What you do with you?
Unmute. All right. So, I love young people. I love teenagers. They're like my people. And the best compliment I ever got from teenagers was when they told me that because of our programs, they feel important and needed in their community. And what more could you want than to lift these kids up so that they find their voice and they share their voice? So, am I unmuted? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So you can hear me, right? All right. So what we've done is we've created a youth task force, and then they didn't like that name, so they mobilized and they became CLEO, a generation of climate leaders. And they are doing exactly what Adrienne suggested. They are wrapping their arms or linking their arms with every other youth organization and partnering with them, like Climate Mobilization and Climate Generation and Fridays for Future, and all of these young people really just wanting the microphone so badly. And we tell them all the time, I'll give you the microphone, I'll give you the platform, but you better know your stuff. So one of the things they're afraid of with CLEO is not being fully informed before we give them those options. And let me tell you, they rise up. We have created some young people between the ages of 14 and 24 who are better speakers than all of us here. And it's really a beautiful thing. And the best thing we do is we put them in front of elected officials. So here in Miami, they want every city, there are 34 cities in one big county. They want every city to declare a climate emergency, to do a CED, they call it, a climate emergency declaration. They have a podcast now, CLEO, called House on Fire, where they interview each other and great experts. So they're out there making noise, and they got 600 people outside the city of Miami Beach begging them to do a climate emergency declaration. And the commissioner said, come inside. And a group of them went in and spoke to the commission. And sure enough, they passed an emergency declaration. City of Miami, a big city in Miami-Dade County. when they were picketing outside the city of Miami, I was there. I go there to just make sure they don't hurt each other. And the mayor came out to speak to them, and they said, no, we can't call it a climate emergency, but we will act like it's an emergency. And they said, but no, no, no. And then they were getting despondent, and I'm going, get back in there. This is the first time anybody has ever asked them to do this. 2 months later, the mayor of the city of Miami declared an emergency. So these kids are getting petitions. Florida has a lot of nonsense happening at the state level. These kids are pushing back. They are refusing to have it. They are informed, they are loud, and they are unapologetic in their demand for a livable future. And we are the wind beneath their wings. And I encourage anybody who loves the power of young people to just give them black platform and some caveats about being informed, and then let them spew. They're pretty good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we're now going to go to some of the audience questions.
Hi, yes, Cynthia. So we have, I know Caroline, you addressed this, but Sarah asked, I thought, a really poignant, powerful question. So she says, I want to be part of the answer, but all the injustices make me so angry. I feel I can't create solutions when I am mad. How do you look at these issues and get me motivated by a higher love, which I believe is the most powerful creative energy and so needed to attract answers to these heartbreaking issues? Thanks for your insights and thanks for all you have shared. So who wants to address that question? When you get so angry, how do you look at these issues and get me motivated by higher love?
Well, there's something called primal therapy. I don't know if you've heard of it, where you scream out loud and you get it out. So I have a conversation with myself every day as to whether to get out of the bed and fight another day or just stay in there and rock myself, especially with the previous administration, where it was so difficult every single day. So I say you have to grieve for the reality if you understand it. Allow yourself to grieve, acknowledge that we have done a lot that needs to be fixed. But then wake up and understand when Jane Goodall said that the greatest danger to our future is apathy. She's counting on us and each other to wake each other up, to get out of the negative feeling of despair and hopelessness, and to see crisis as opportunity, because it is. And my motto in life is, when they say to you, be careful not to bite off more than you can chew, my response has become, well, I would rather choke on greatness than nibble on mediocrity. Get out of my way. So I think we just have to be bold and out there to get people to want to get on the bandwagon as well.
Dr. Hollis, response to that question?
I can't, I take that anger and use it to demand change. So I don't know if that comes from a position of love. I doubt it. It comes from, I pray all the time, that I can go to heaven, like, Jesus, pray for me, because I'm about to tell these people something, and let me keep my job, amen. But I think channeling all that anger, don't waste it. Channel it. When you speak at public meetings, speak from a position of passion about the issue. Use it, this sounds corny, use it for good, right? And, speaking, maybe Reverend ready to talk about it, Nettie can talk about it, but from a position of, I love the people that I work with, the communities, but I'm angry on their behalf. And that's what I use. So I don't know if that helps.
I would only add, is everything has been beautiful, is if these angers come out of realization of injustice, it is sacred anger, and therefore it's wood to the fire for us that we just need to use and just see how to channel. So we can, because it has a purpose, and therefore just finding what the purpose is, so we can recreate and create and remold our world in a way that is just. Is our hearts beating, and that means we're alive. It's a wonderful thing. It's good news in that sense. So it's just a matter of using it in a constructive way, and to see what needs to be deconstructed too, so we can live the life that we all hope to have, of justice and beauty and love.
Okay. So why do you think that regions with significant cultural and religious roots steeped in African and Latin heritage are hit so hard with natural disasters?
Can you repeat that question again, please?
Why do you think that regions with significant cultural and religious roots steeped in African and Latin heritage are hit so hard with natural disasters? Or maybe better, maybe especially vulnerable to the impacts of these natural disasters?
Well, I think that's a hard question because climate change is blind, right? Itself, it's not racist. But I think that the communities haven't been, it's just like generational wealth in this country. These nations haven't been allowed to develop. And I say allowed because I think that's part of the control is to keep people from succeeding and from developing to their full potential. And therefore they are in a position that makes them more at risk. I think that's, for me, that would be my answer.
Yeah, I would also, I wouldn't say that they are more affected by climate. It's happening everywhere, but perhaps because of injustice and racial injustice, systemic racism, they are more vulnerable. And maybe when we see those images, we feel like they're suffering, they're suffering more, but it's because of this history that they have inherited and has not allowed them to be prepared in cases like this. But because big things are happening within the United States itself that I don't experience when I'm in Venezuela. But people, so I may be wrong, but I don't think it's necessarily more over there than it happens even here in the US.
Other question, what hope does the new administration bring in regards to EJ, and what role does the EPA play in ensuring that EJ is relevant? So what hope does the new administration bring in regards to EJ, and what role does the EPA play in ensuring that EJ is relevant?
Well, this administration gives me hope in terms of defining or redefining public service as truly public service. The concept of a climate conservation corps is something I want to push because I think it would do a tremendous amount to lift people out of poverty and do the right thing at the same time. I always picture a parking lot in Atlanta that I'd like to see in Miami in every major parking lot. And it's a parking lot where the parking spots are covered. They have a roof over them so the cars don't get hot. We call that adaptation. We're making sure the cars are cool. The roofs of those car tops covers are solar. So they're harvesting energy from the sun and not contributing to those heat trapping, earth cooking gases. And then the thing that pulled it all together for me is what if our region could be a hub for manufacturing and installing those photovoltaics, those solar panels. So there you have a way of addressing adaptation, mitigation, and the economics, the vulnerability, the workforce that is needed. And so I would like to picture that kind of future for all of us, where the Biden administration really follows up with this climate conservation corps and helps build job markets around these incredible solutions to climate, both adaptation and mitigation.
Anyone else wants to respond to this? Because we have another question.
I'll go quickly. This administration has already released more than 30 executive orders, and more than 12 deal with EJ specifically, and that's great. Now I'm excited or interested in seeing what's going to happen. How's that going to be implemented? And so I'm excited and yet concerned. I mean, there's nobody on the Hill who has a history of doing environmental justice. You know what I mean? We do have at EPA, thank God, Administrator Regan, however you want to pronounce it. And that's hopeful because EPA should be taking the lead on this. But then every agency ought to have an environmental justice role, not just because it's in Executive Order 12898, it ought to be automatic anyway. And we need people on the Hill who have EJ experience, not because you heard about it and you want to get behind the bandwagon of this issue, but no, you have experience in some regard, in some way. So I'm excited about what's been done so far, and I'm hopeful that more will be done to staff offices with people who know what they're doing, who understand partnership and working with others, for me.
Okay, we have the next question from Lauren. I assume most of us on the webinar agree with terms used and issues raised. Involvement within and outside is important. How do you communicate all this information to someone or communities who doesn't believe in it? And then how is this information, I'm trying to find it in the chat here. How does this information communicated to policymakers? So involvement within and outside is important. How do you communicate all of this information to someone or communities who don't or who doesn't believe in it? How is this information communicated to policymakers? Does anyone want to take this one?
I would say communicate bluntly. We have a local county commissioner, again, Miami-Dade County, 3 million people, a little less. And we have 13 commissioners and a big mayor of the county, right? One of the commissioners put forward 3 days ago a resolution for Miami-Dade County commissioners to support the Keystone Pipeline extension and bring back those jobs. And we went nuts. Within about 10 seconds of us finding out about that resolution, we confronted him. We created a call to action alert. We had over 650 people emailing or buzzing every commissioner, telling them, connect the dots. The Keystone Pipeline is why we are a frontline community here in Miami and why we are considered ground zero for the climate crisis. So the solution to the jobs that are lost is not to put it back in and keep polluting, but to find new renewable energy jobs for these people. So I would say the best way to get people who are, so is to sort of put a mirror in front of them, explain it. And we called all the commissioners, not just the one who proposed it. So they started educating each other and we started offering climate 101s, Commissioner, if you would like us to come and sit with you so we can explain, we'll be happy to do that. And we do that all the time. A lot of electeds seek us out after. I'd like them. My dream is that anybody who denies climate as an elected official, climate crisis, does never, ever get elected. So it should become a liability for them to, especially in communities like ours.
I totally agree with that. And Mustafa always said that if they aren't saying what you need to hear, don't vote for them, right? But, so another thing is, when opportunities present themselves to engage with legislators, to public comment, or right now with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, listening sessions, they're calling it. And I've reached out to communities whose story I know. I'm like, y'all need to talk. And they're like, are you talking? No, people need to hear from you about what you are going through and how crazy it's been and why you need an office of public participation, because it's for you. And communities need to also demand, they shouldn't even have to, but they should have, in every situation, they need to be at the table. People will tell you how they like to receive information, and you need to be culturally relevant. And you need to be open to listening to that. And you need to be opening to change however you do information. I tell people that at work, people want to know 3 things. What is it? How does it affect me? And what can I do about it? So you need, and those are questions you need to ask about any report you're putting out, UCS. Who is it for? And who's going to benefit most from the information? And how are you, who are you writing this for? And if you're not writing it for them, write it for them. Write it with them, So that's, for me, that's the sticking point. So, I do believe in getting communities to tell us what they need, so.
Caroline, do you have something to add, or?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, let's see, I don't see any other more questions posted in the box right now. Cynthia, do you want to move to the next question? Talking a little bit about the challenges on the road to climate literacy.
Okay. What are some of the challenges on the road to climate literacy? How do we begin to practically address them?
I've got to go first because Carolyn said something that she said, climate is the threat multiplier. And when I use that term when I've used that term in my work, I was told, you can't say that, that's incorrect, because that term was created for climate scientists or whatever, not necessarily in my work, at my work, but in the work that I do. That, and I'm like, they were saying, well, people won't understand it. I said, the people I work with most definitely will understand it, because it's true and it affects the community. So I think we need to get on board with what the terminology means. And we need to do that from the community's perspective, right? Because that's who we should be listening to and talking with. And so, all these, we need to get on board with definitions. I know there's a big discussion about what environmental justice means right now. And my first thing, well, ask the people who suffer from it, who deal with it, and see what they think it is, So for me, that communication is about giving, getting the understanding that communities have, and then, in making sure that that's the way scientists and whoever else, politicians and policy, it has that language in it.
Thank you. Reverend Nettie, you want to tackle that question?
Yeah, briefly, I guess I can say that, one of some of the challenges for climate literacy, definitely the fact that we all recognize it's a global issue can create a lot of overwhelming feelings. That's definitely a challenge. Misinformation has been a lot. Even within Christian communities, sometimes bad theology is seeing even climate change as the end of times, and therefore it means it's good news because Jesus is coming back. Well, bad theology is also an issue within Christian communities. And the pandemic, of course, the fact that we are already overwhelmed by a pandemic, and then we have to talk about another big issue that is affecting the whole world. So these are definitely challenges on the road. But when we begin to educate ourselves, including myself, about climate change and where it comes from, and then how to begin healing the causes and changing the causes, we slowly but surely become empowered as people to do our part. And definitely that part can only be done but in community, not alone. And so therefore there is definitely a call to work with others to bring about the changes that we need, the transformation that our world needs. And in that sense, faith communities, that's exactly the work of faith communities, faith traditions. Our call has always been in the business of transformation, and we can provide guidance and support that humanity needs today to accomplish the challenges of our time. And we definitely recognize that the challenges that we have today require personal, institutional, and systemic transformation, and we have a lot that we can give on that. And the other thing that we like to remember is that 84% of the world's population, the people say that they are spiritual or religious, and all religions of the world talk about the importance of caring for one another and caring for the natural world. If we can really access that, if we can help people connect their faith with ecology, with environmental justice, there's a lot of power behind there. So that's one of the ways in which we believe, and I believe that we can start overcoming our challenges of today. We connect with that message, with that mandate, with that calling, and there start making the changes that we need to do today.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn, did you have a response to that question before we move on?
Yeah, as a science teacher and as a school principal, there's a motto that we're all guided by, the student-teacher relationship. And it says, first you reach them, then you teach them. And so the whole idea with climate communication is to make sure you don't just say we're meeting them where they are, but that you actually are meeting them where they are. And so when my frontline communities and my neighborhoods weren't coming to the table, we went to them and we took food and dinner and offered childcare and made it accessible for them to take a deep breath and to stop and talk about their issues and their concerns. So if you want to provide them an opportunity and a seat at the table, you got to make it convenient for them to start with. And once they get that fire in their belly, they're good. That is capacity building. The language we use is important. If you live in Miami, you've got to do everything in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And if you don't, you're leaving out a huge segment of society. So being able to use the right language and to work with the climate scientists, because we like to bring in the climate scientists to do panels after we do some community outreach, but they have to break it down better. And so we tell these scientists consumable nuggets of information. That's what I want. I don't want all your data thrown at us. What is the takeaway you want people to know and to get and to be able to say? And we've gotten a few gems. We've gotten scientists to talk to populations that want to speak about this, that there are multiple lines of evidence documenting the data. And they love saying that, the communities of color. There are multiple lines of evidence that are backing this up. The other thing we do with communication is we no longer take it for granted that people know anything, because they don't. I know that 75% of the population knows that climate is a problem, but they don't understand the urgency and the need for agency at the level we're at now. And that's why I will not be a part of any more studies that come up with recommendations and writing reports. We are into the action mode over here now, and that's what we want. Take the studies off the shelf, dust them off, and let's look at the recommendations and prioritize which ones we're acting on. And the more that we can elect people who think like that and want to move forward instead of just putting their foot on the brake and studying it and studying it and studying it, let's just start. Do it.
So let's lead into the next question in terms of what a just climate society looks like. I know you have some ideas on that as well, Caroline, and you are doing so much work. So what are the rewards? What does it look like?
It looks like when that commissioner got his resolution failed 10-3, he wrote a letter on Twitter explaining why he did it and coming up with some circular reasoning, like a circular firing squad, about how the need for septic tanks to be replaced and all. So we just called him out and we said, we're with you. Let's talk about septic tanks and sewers and replacement. So we just took his energy and galvanized it into a solution that we wanted. So success to me looks like stopping bad things from happening and taking ideas that they challenge us with and saying, yes, we need to do it. What's your first step? How can we meet? So we create a seat at the table for everybody. The utilities company down here drives us nuts, but we will sit down with them. We will talk to them. We'll explain what we want from them. And if they want to play with us, they got to play with sunshine on them, where the truth of what they're saying. We have Florida Power and Light, for example. They like to tell us how many gazillion mega gigahertz of panels they're putting up. And I'm constantly saying, so what does that take our energy portfolio percentage to? What percentage of our state's energy portfolio is now solar? And it's still less than 2%. So don't give me all the megahertz and gigahertz and think I'm going to be impressed. When your percentage reaches 50%, come and talk to us. So I think success looks like the big players getting the message and doing the right thing. Success looks like an economy where you can have a climate conservation corps, make a lot of money, and do things right for people and for property. So I don't have a whole lot of successes to chime on, except to say that we're being heard, that they're taking some action, but not nearly as much as I think they need to take, nor as quickly as they need to take it.
Thank you. Dr. Hollis, what does success look like?
Thank you for that question. Quickly, I don't know if everybody took time to read the executive orders. So one night I sat here and I read them, and this is when there was fewer than there are now, and I just read them all, just quickly, just the little overview. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if these executive orders were truly fulfilled and followed, we'd have a just society. This is the roadmap for creating equity and equality and justice for all. And that's what it looks like. It looks like all of those things being addressed and taken care of. That's what it looked like. All of those things. It's inclusive. It's creating the perfect, I said, this is creating the perfect country. And I said that at UCS, I'm not gonna, surely we can do the same. So I'm floored by that is my vision, is that those things happen in those orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they do, then we're gonna be okay.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you. Reverend Nettie?
Yes, I like Green Faith Vision, and I'm going to read it very briefly here. It says, is a world transformed in which humanity in all its diversity has developed a shared reverence for life on earth. Religious and spiritual communities everywhere generate a moral awakening to the sacredness of earth and the dignity of all people. Together, we build a resilient, caring communities and economies that meets everyone's needs and protects the planet. Is one where the era of conquest, extraction, and exploitation has given way to cooperation and community. The good life is one of connectedness with each other and with all of nature. It is a world of flourishing life that replaces despair with joy, scarcity with sacred abundance, shared abundance, and privilege with justly distributed power.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Cynthia, may I add something? Because I put a link up or marked it.
Okay.
There's a Florida Future Fund report that I would love those interested to read. It is a roadmap to raise funds for a just transition in the state of Florida to this climate crisis. And it is pretty remarkable. It was done by the CLEO Institute and the Center for American Progress. And it really has I's dotted and T's crossed so that people can understand where the money is coming from and how we prioritize vulnerable communities in addressing the climate crisis in this vulnerable state. So I just wanted to flag that report for those interested.
Thank you. And I think Katrina has another question for us, right?
Yes, from Erica. So what do you think of the Justice for Black Farmers Act? Any takers? Thoughts on the Justice for Black Farmers Act?
I looked at that question and I do not know that act, so I can't provide an opinion based on the question.
Adrienne?
Well, I only know a little bit about it. And I am gonna say that, land loss is real for Black farmers and farmers of color. So in that regard, I totally support it. And I think that it's the least thing that we can do. But I also think that, and I said this yesterday to some folks about, when some extremely rich people want to give money to do things on a global scale, like plant 3 billion trees. Well, who's going to take care of that? I said, here we talk, you need to give the land back to the people and pay them for doing the work. And I mentioned Black farmers and I mentioned Indigenous folks. And so I fully support, I'm one person, anything that's going to give people an opportunity for generational wealth and give them back what was taken from them. Thank you.
I'm not informed enough to weigh in, so I'll reserve comment.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go to the last, the question about next steps folks can take to finish up.
What are 3 steps those who are listening and watching can take to play their part? Let's start with Reverend Nettie.
Well, with respect, of course, it depends a lot of what your community is, but thinking about my community, faith-based community, people who are trying to figure out what to do before the reality of climate change. One of the things that we always like to do is, for one, is invite people to connect with their own personal stories with the natural world, including other people. Also using the footprint calculator as a resource to figure out, okay, what is my footprint? What is my part in the climate change issue? And then we have a resource too that we posted at the beginning, livingthechange.net, where again, people begin looking at, based on their lifestyle and their impact on the environment, what kinds of things can I do on my own personal level to start affecting change for the better in terms of climate and climate issues and bring about climate justice. But as we have heard well with the work that Adrienne and Caroline do, I think it's very important also to connect with other environmental organizations locally that can continue teaching us on these issues and build power together, gathering with others, building community, so we can also affect this systemic change. So there's so much that we can do at the individual level, but definitely we have less than 10 years to stop climate change, as scientists have told us. It is also time to build power, and so we need to connect with others to do this work. It's not any longer an individual thing that we can do. It's not just about recycling or not using plastic. It's a lot more than that. It's affecting systemic change. So coming together with other folks and growing in this matter and supporting each other in that process. So yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Hollis, 3 steps.
Yes, one of them we just heard, I join an organization, join an environmental organization, whether it's youth or one that has existed for a while, join and contribute that way, contribute your power, your superpower. And then use your voice and use your voice there, but use it in comments, use it, in meetings, in community meetings, just use it, make sure that you're heard. I tell Vernice, like the Who's from Whoville, we're here, make your voice known. And then finally, I said, demand more from your elected officials and from this administration. Hold them accountable. They work for you, right? They work for us. And also demand more from from the medical profession when it comes to COVID vaccines and things of that nature. Demand what you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Caroline.
Well, everything my friends just said, but I also think we should rate ourselves. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what's our own climate justice literacy? How well do we understand the issues? On a scale of 1, meaning I know nothing, leave me alone, I don't want to know. 10 means I know everything and I preach about it. And then your engagement scale on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, I don't talk to anybody about it. I'm an island, leave me alone. And 10 is I don't shut up about it. People see me coming and they run because they know I'm in their face. So I would say the first thing you do is rate yourself and realize that your climate journey is a journey, and make sure you move up on your scales. The second thing is your voice, your vote, and run for office. Anybody on the call right now who is thinking about running for office, do it. And support people you know who want to be public servants and have them do it. And the third thing I would say is do not underestimate your power to influence change. We all have a ripple effect that we will never quantify. And I hope you know that and that you will ripple away for the rest of your lives.
Thank you. So we've come to the very end of our forum. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for sharing part of your afternoon and just your expertise and your work with us. I was very much looking forward to this discussion, and I do plan to tap you very gently in the future to continue conversations and engagements with you. Once again, really, this is very much appreciated as well, just anything based on the comments. And to our attendees, thank you once again for spending 2 hours with us on a Saturday. We hope you've been enjoying these series of community forums. We've been celebrating the whole month, and we've been moving past this month to continue our celebration. But next week, we end this month with The Future is Here. So in conversation with the women who have been shaping, pushing boundaries, are they introducing new lenses, new frameworks, new language, new ways of thinking about these issues? And what do they plan for our futures? And how are they thinking about our current relationship with the natural world and environment and issues of justice and injustice, and accountability, and also in terms of celebrating and how to create new space and pathways for anyone who's interested, particularly in youth, into our various environmental spaces. So please join us next Saturday, same time. The Future is Here, led in discussion by Tamara Toles O'Loughlin, an international environmental advocate and strategist. The panel is Erica Dickerson Dispenza, playwright and cultural worker, playwright in residence at the Public Theater, Sikita Grant, vice president of programs at the Solutions Project, and Karina Newsom, community engagement manager of Georgia Audubon. So once again, please tune in next Saturday, 1 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will have this video posted by next week, along with the program and a list of all the resources that we've shared today. So be safe, take care of each other, and I will see you next Saturday. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Well done, Katrina.
Bye.
Thank you, Cynthia, Adrienne, Nettie.